Amina sat on the floor of her small hut, staring at the drum in front of her. Her hands trembled as she reached for it, the surface smooth and worn from years of use. The drum was the only thing left that truly felt like hers. Moonlight slipped through the cracks in the wooden walls, creating shadows on the dirt floor. The bruises on her cheek and arms throbbed with a dull ache in the cool night air. Fatai, her husband, had left hours ago, slamming the door so hard it felt like the whole house shook. She didn't know where he had gone, but she knew this moment of peace would not last. The drum was hidden under a tattered cloth in the corner of the room, away from Fatai's eyes. Amina's father had given it to her years ago, before he passed away. She remembered his warm smile and the words he'd spoken as he handed it to her, "When the world turns its back on you, let the drum speak for you." Amina believed the drum had a spirit of its own, a voice that carried emotions too deep for words. It had been her closest companion in the years before her marriage, helping her through the hardest times. But when she married Fatai, everything changed. He was strict and harsh, always reminding her of the rules he believed a wife should follow. "Drumming is for men," he would sneer. "You're a wife now. Act like one." Over time, his words became sharper, his temper shorter, and Amina learned to stay quiet to avoid his anger. But even though she stayed silent, her spirit never fully broke. That night, as the silence in the hut pressed down on her, Amina felt something stir inside. She couldn't keep her feelings bottled up any longer. She needed to let them out, to remind herself of who she was. Slowly, she pulled the drum out of its hiding place. Her hands hovered over the smooth, tight surface, her heart pounding. Then, with a deep breath, she struck the first note. The sound was soft and low, almost like a whisper. It felt like the drum was waking up after a long silence. Amina played carefully at first, her hands unsure and her rhythm slow. But as she continued, the beats grew stronger and louder. Each beat carried her feelings, her sadness, her fear, her frustration, and the quiet anger that had been building inside her for years. The drum became her voice, shouting out what she couldn't say. Unbeknownst to Amina, the sound of her drumming traveled beyond the walls of her hut. A few villagers passing by stopped in their tracks, drawn to the strange, haunting rhythm. It wasn't like any music they had heard before. It was raw and powerful, filled with emotion. Among them was Mama Kemi, an older woman known for her wisdom and kindness. She stood in the shadows, listening closely. Her heart ached as she recognized the pain in the music. She knew Amina was crying out for help, and she decided she had to act. Inside the hut, Amina's drumming came to an abrupt halt when she heard the faint creak of the door behind her. She froze, her heart racing. Turning slowly, she saw Fatai standing in the doorway. His eyes were red, and his face was twisted in anger. "What did I tell you about that drum?" he growled, stepping into the room. Amina clutched the drum tightly, her hands shaking. "It's just music," she said softly, her voice barely audible. Fatai's laugh was cold and harsh. "Music," he spat. "You think you can embarrass me with this noise?" He grabbed the drum from her hands and hurled it against the wall. The sound of splintering wood filled the room, followed by a heavy silence. Amina stared at the broken pieces, her heart sinking. The drum, her only source of comfort, was gone. "I'll teach you to obey," Fatai snarled before storming out of the hut. Amina sank to the floor, tears streaming down her face. She felt broken, just like the drum. The next morning, whispers filled the village market. Women gathered in small groups, their voices hushed but filled with curiosity. "Did you hear the drumming last night?" one woman asked. It sounded like the drum was crying. Another nodded, her expression serious. "It came from Amina's hut. Something is wrong in that house." Mama Kemi listened quietly to the chatter. She didn't say much, but her mind was busy. She decided to visit Amina that day, bringing a basket of vegetables as an excuse. When she arrived at Amina's hut, she found the younger woman sitting on the floor, sewing a torn wrapper. Amina's face was swollen, and she avoided looking up. "Amina, my child," Mama Kemi said gently, setting the basket down. "Your drum spoke last night. It carried pain, but it also carried strength. Are you all right?" Amina hesitated, her hands stilling over the fabric. She wanted to open up, to tell Mama Kemi everything, but fear held her back. "I'm fine, Mama Kemi," she said finally, forcing a weak smile. "Thank you for the vegetables." Mama Kemi nodded, though she didn't believe Amina's words. As she left the hut, she made up her mind to help, no matter what it took. Amina's music had been a cry for help, and Mama Kemi was determined to answer it. That evening, Amina sat alone in her hut, staring at the broken drum. Her father's words echoed in her mind, "Let the drum speak for you." Slowly, she began gathering the fragments. Her hands worked methodically, gluing and binding the pieces together. It was a slow and painstaking process, but with each piece she fixed, her resolve grew stronger. The drum wasn't perfect, but it was whole again, just like her spirit. In the weeks that followed, Amina started playing again, but this time she was careful. She played late at night, when she knew Fatai wouldn't hear her. Her rhythms were different now, more deliberate, more precise. They carried a message, a secret code that spoke of her pain and her defiance. The villagers began to notice the strange patterns in the drumming. At first, they were confused, but Mama Kemi understood. She gathered a group of trusted women and taught them to listen closely. Together, they began to decode Amina's rhythms, piecing together the story she couldn't tell with words. Meanwhile, Fatai grew more controlling. He forbade Amina from attending village gatherings and kept a close watch on her every move. One evening, he discovered her newly restored drum. In a fit of rage, he smashed it once more, his fury blinding him to the determination in Amina's eyes. "You think you can challenge me?" he shouted. "You're nothing without me." But Amina didn't let his words break her. As soon as he left, she began rebuilding the drum again. Each time it broke, she fixed it. It became a symbol of her resilience, a reminder that she would not be silenced. Mama Kemi and the woman decided it was time to act. They planned a gathering at the weekly market, where they would use music and storytelling to confront the issue of domestic abuse. Amina, though terrified, agreed to participate. She knew this was her chance to make her voice heard. The day of the gathering arrived, and the market was buzzing with activity. Amina sat in the center of the square, her newly restored drum in front of her. Her hands shook as she struck the first note. The rhythm started softly but grew louder and more confident with each beat. The crowd fell silent, captivated by the music. It was raw and powerful, filled with emotion. One by one, the women began to speak. They shared their own stories of suffering and survival, their voices blending with Amina's music to create a powerful chorus of resilience. "We have stayed silent for too long," Mama Kemi declared. "Today, we say enough." The gathering sparked something in the crowd. Some men, who had turned a blind eye to their wives' suffering, began to reflect on their actions. Women found the courage to speak out, breaking free from the chains of fear and shame that had held them back for so long. Fatai, humiliated and enraged, confronted Amina after the gathering. But this time, she didn't back down. "You cannot silence me," she said, her voice steady. "My drum will speak for me, and for all the women you've tried to silence." The village elders, moved by the courage of Amina and the other women, held a council meeting to address the issue of domestic abuse. Fatah was held accountable for his actions and faced serious consequences for his cruelty. The council also implemented measures to protect women, ensuring that Amina's suffering would not be in vain. As the months passed, Amina's story spread beyond the village. Her drumbeat became a symbol of resilience and hope, inspiring other women to find their voices. She started a drumming school, teaching young girls how to use music as a tool for expression and empowerment. The scars on her body remained, but they no longer defined her. Amina had reclaimed her voice, and with it, her life. The drum that once carried her pain now carried her triumph, echoing across the hills and valleys of the land. Please like, share and subscribe if you enjoyed our story. Thank you.